Over the last 50 years, Bangladesh-USA relationship enjoyed an enormous progress with mutual respect and cooperation. USA support is exemplary in many development and global issues. Bangladesh is world's one of the fastest growing economies and the fastest growing middle income countries. During the Liberation War in 1971, when Pakistan Army started genocide and destruction, the then US President Richard Nixon and Secretary of State Henry Kissinger were supporting the marauding Pakistani army regime. But the peace-loving people, along with politicians across the aisle, journalists, academicians, longshoremen, with real American spirit, went against their own government. First time in the American history, they changed the foreign policy of their government by non-violent movement. The Bangladesh concert was held in New York to help the cause of emerging Bangladesh, which was the beginning of the concept of aid concert for charitable causes. Bangladeshi people are so proud of such their approach, activities by many such friends. Our Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina hosted beautiful events and honored many foreign friends in Bangladesh. There were so many people participated in the struggle. Today, we remember them with gratitude. Symbolically, we'll show our appreciation to three of our friends who are present among us today. Dr. David Nylin had deep connection with Bengali culture and people. Before Liberation War, he worked from 1967 to 1970 at the Cholera Research Hospital, which is now ICGDRB in Dhaka, where he led the team that developed oral rehydration therapy, credited by the WHO with saving well over 60 million lives globally to date. Following the March 25, 1971 massacre, Dr. Nylin co-founded Bangladesh Information Center in Washington, D.C., which coordinated US congressional lobbying to stop arms shipment to Pakistan and support Bangladesh independence. The center worked closely with Bangladeshi patriots who had resigned from the Pakistan embassy in Washington in protest against 1971 atrocities. After the liberation, the center lobbied Congress for recognition and aid for the newly independent country. The center archives have been preserved at the Widener University at Harvard University and are available to scholars. A new book by Sam Jaffe titled An Internal Mirror has documented American grassroots efforts on behalf of Bangladesh during the independence struggle. Returning to Bangladesh on January 2, 1972, Dr. Nylin was present at Tejka Airport January 10th when Sheikh Mujibur Rahman returned to Dhaka. He met Sheikh Mujib later at Bangabhavan and presented him with compilation of the BIDC Sumter document. He is the recipient of the Friends of Bangladesh War Honor from Sheikh Hasina, in addition to recognition from numerous US organizations. David Weisbrod, in 1971, he was a 24-year-old graduate student, having returned from a 2-year stint as a Peace Corps volunteer in Nepal. While in graduate school, he had written a series of editorials criticizing American policy towards Pakistan. These editorials captured the attention of the Bangladesh Information Center, which at the time was looking for a full-time staff to lead the lobbying initiative on Capitol Hill. When approached, he dropped out of the graduate school to join as a co-head of the center. The struggle of the Bengalis against Pakistani oppression struck him as a rare moral issue that called him to action. Kaiser Zaman, a Bengali refugee with experience in relief work during Cyclone Bhola, became co-head with him. They worked very well together and were an effective team. He focused squarely on the lobbying campaign, presenting the moral, political, humanitarian perspective as to why a change in US policy was in America's interest. In addition to Kaiser and him, approximately 15 regular volunteers and a broader network of dozens of semi-regular volunteers from pro-Bangladesh organizations around the country worked to support the center's lobbying program. The heart of the campaign was to promote the passage of the Saxby Charge Amendment to the Foreign Assistance Act, whose aim was to curtail economic and military aid to Pakistan. Their approach was bipartisan, and again they were fortunately that both Republican and Democratic senators and congressmen were responsive to the message. In the end of their lobbying effort were successful. Saxby Charge was adopted in the Senate, and together with Gallagher Amendment in the House of Representatives, the Foreign Assistance Act was amended and signed into law by President Nixon. For his part, the work was incredibly inspiring. Each day for him was a good day. When Bangladesh was recognized as an independent nation in April 1972, the work of Bangladesh Information Center came to a happy ending. He wrote at that time, just about all the immediate points which drew people to this cause have now been resolved. And in a sense, the Bangladesh Information Center, as it was originally formed, has now attained nirvana. After independence, he was selected by the International Rescue Committee to be the representative in Dhaka, where he served with pride, knowing that the future of Bangladesh was now in the hands of its people, and that a new and more promising chapter in the relationship between Bangladesh and USA could now unfold. Leon Levin, he said, when Bengal suffered a catastrophic hurricane and flood in 1970, I donated my time and a television commercial in order to raise money for the victims of the disaster. At that time, I was introduced to the kindness and warmth of the Bengali people. Later, when George Harrison's wonderful film raised America's consciousness regarding the 1971 War of Independence and showed the world what horrors that had been inflicted on the Bengali people by West Pakistan, I felt I must also join the fight for the independence in whatever way that I could. I suspended my regular filmmaking business and decided to produce, direct, and photograph a film that would raise money and awareness regarding the fierce war and the plight of the millions of refugees that had fled East Bengal for the safety in India. I gathered a small crew, lots of film, and flew to India. Once there, we connected with a wonderful group of patriotic musicians led by Benu Rahman that wished to tour the many refugee camps and try to bring hope and solace to the battered survivors who had fled the Pakistani onslaught. We transported them for weeks and eventually took the troop across the river and the land that was become Bangladesh. There they entered the Mukti Bahini and had a first-hand look at what these valiant soldiers were up against. I went out on patrols with the fighters and tried as best I could to record their determinations and bravery. It wasn't pretty. After 8 weeks, I felt I had almost collected enough materials for a film, but I was anxious to ride with the troops into Dhaka on a final day of the victory. However, I then afoul of Madame Gandhi, who was planning her own contribution to the war effort. She did not want any Americans around, especially since my country was arming and aiding the other side of the battle. She locked my crew and I up for a few days and then banished us from her country. I wanted our film entitled Joy Bangla to be feature length and run in theaters, and I spent too much time trying to make it perfect. Unfortunately, by the time the editing was finished, Bangladesh had not only become an independent nation, but Sheikh Mujibur Rahman had been deposed, and the military had changed the face of the new nation. No one would distribute Joy Bangla. It was characterized as yesterday's news, and no outlet, theater, TV, or otherwise, was ever found. Initially, before I left for my journey, my very wise and prophetic wife, Raquel, had cautioned me that I should make a film 10 minutes long and get it on TV in the States as soon as possible. I have since learned to always listen to her. The film and 40,000 feet of footage that went into making Joy Bangla lived in tin cans in my basement for over 20 years until Tariq and Catherine Masood found me. They convinced me to give them all that I had done so that they might make their own version of Bangladesh War of Independence and recall the nation's moment of greatness and what freedom and independence had meant. They charmed me completely, and I gave them every bit of film, sound, and still photos that I had. They worked assiduously for almost 5 years and crafted their wonderful film, Muktir Gan. I could not have produced my relationship with these two brilliant filmmakers who became my dearest friends. How they, to family, brought so much of my imagery and their wisdom and commentary to the people all over the world never ceases to impress me. I always felt Tarek was like my younger brother. Catherine, the sister that I never had. My heart breaks each time that I think of how such a great human being as Tarek had his life cut so short. Catherine, however, carries on their work and nurtures their son, Nihad, who will someday perhaps carry on the tradition of humanism and artistry. I consider my connection to the people of Bangladesh stronger today than it has ever been. And as an American, I feel blessed to have become joined with and honored by such a great, enduring people, their country, their culture, and their warm, welcoming world. Thank you.